Hi, welcome to another episode of the Tango Banter. I am Elizaveta, and you're joining me on a journey of discovery today as I am trying out some new things. As I said last time, I'm now publishing this podcast as an audio as well as a video on my YouTube channel. So today I'm trying out some new settings and sitting in a different chair because I've noticed that every time I do this episode, so much of my work is just to get myself centered mentally, to be present for this. And the space that I'm in and what's around me definitely has an impact on how this process goes. So I'm trying out some new setups and using a new mic, and I would love to hear from you if these changes are translating positively the way I'm hoping, or if there's still things that are not working as well as they should be. I appreciate those of you reaching out to me and just giving me that little bit of feedback. It helps me to figure out what I'm doing. So, today's episode is pretty special because tomorrow I have my birthday, and it's a big one. I am turning 40. And I have so many things to say about that, about turning 40. And I spent the last few weeks just pondering what it is that is important to say at this milestone in my life. So I'll dive into some of those ideas. I ultimately did not come up with anything concrete, rather more of a feeling, sort of an energetic echo of something. But before I dive into that, I want to alert you to something really fun and exciting that I'm doing to encourage you to tune in to next week's episode. I am going to have my very first guest on this podcast. I know some of you are saying, finally. I've gotten so many messages of people saying, why don't you do an interview? Why don't you invite people on your show? So I'm doing it. I am inviting a wonderful person, a wonderful dancer, and highly admired in the tango community, none other than Horacio Godoy. Yes, Horacio Godoy is my first guest, and we are going to have a really fun chat about him in the tango world and his life and the projects that he is doing right now in the tango communities around the world. Very inspiring, very inspiring. So I hope you make sure to tune in next week and help me spread the word about this podcast. Share it on your feed, share it with friends. I appreciate the support. So here I am, about to turn 40 years old, and I grew up with the notion that 40 is really the marker of a big shift for women. I mean, 30 is that too, I think, but 40 is where, there's thinking about menopause and how long you still have in your fertile window. Those kinds of questions come up more acutely. There's also this feeling of like, if you haven't found a relationship by 40, then it's going to be really hard in your 40s. So there's some sort of like a doorway you walk through at that point. And for me as a dancer in the tango community, it's been also an observation that there's a somewhat of a conception about being a dancer in your 40s is not as easy. It's not as easy to get dances as when you were in your 20s. So I've heard things like that from women complaining about how well they were doing back when they started, and that things have really changed. So I grew up, spent my life until this point looking ahead to this thing called turning 40. And for a long time, I had a bone to pick with a lot of traditionally accepted beliefs about being a woman, and I had certain convictions and beliefs about it, but I felt like I didn't really have the right to share it yet because I wasn't 40. So whatever my opinion was when I was 30 or 35 about being 40, it was all conjecture, you know? And so in some ways, I'm actually excited to hit this marker because now I feel I do have some right to speak about what it means to reach that age and what are the possibilities that I feel within myself and what might be some of my main takeaways so far. I don't feel for myself that this is a marker of slowing down. If anything, I feel like I'm just getting started. In fact, I think the way I feel now is the way I was hoping I would feel when I was graduating from college. That I had anticipated that graduating from college was going to be this moment where my questions about what I'm supposed to do in life and how am I supposed to do it were going to be given to me by that point. But no, that did not happen at all. And as I'm about to start my 4th decade, I feel just now it's like, oh, finally, I kind of figured it out so that I can really do the work that I'm supposed to be doing. And I'm curious if other women feel this way because I don't hear it as often, but sometimes I just know, people don't share that kind of experience. But I want to hear from you if you have a very positive relationship to being in your 40s. And I know that for men, hitting 40 is also a big marker. And in fact, my boyfriend, he's the same age as me, where our birthdays are a month apart. So we just celebrated his 40th birthday as well. And it's still a little bit different for men. So I don't want to speak too broadly about these convictions I have, because I definitely think that they apply to me as a woman in a particular of a particular generation. Even maybe this doesn't apply years from now with women who will be in their 40s later, but regardless, I have some things to say about it. So here we go. Number one is that I really don't think that at this point, being 40 means downhill. It just, I don't feel that on a physical level. I don't feel that emotionally or mentally. I feel so much of what we experience is dictated by our beliefs about what's possible and what we deserve. So when it comes to things like tango and dancing and social dancing, I don't believe women who are past a certain age are at a disadvantage. They might be at a disadvantage in a certain context. But what's cool is that tango is so malleable, so you can kind of do with it what you decide. And I think it goes back to what I was talking about last week, about really starting from a place of believing in yourself. So that's kind of a requirement for you to believe that you can actually have something different. If you don't have that, there's no way of convincing you. Honestly, it's got to come from that faith or hope or some sort of possibility. And within that place of possibility, you start seeing what other things that could happen. So for me, when I face this very common experience among women where you realize that you're starting to get passed over by dancers who maybe you used to dance with, and they were frequently asking you to dance, and then now they're not asking you to dance, and maybe they're asking women who are much younger, who are new in the community. It's a very common scenario. So I was within that context myself when I was in, I guess, a few years ago. And I really felt that tango felt like a box that I did not fit into anymore. And I quit it for a while. I felt like I was kind of done with it because I did feel that there was nothing I could do. I can't be younger. And I could tell that I was too tired of trying to keep up the image of it. And, it was just a lot of work. So I did quit. And then when I went back, this whole new world opened up to me. And my insight was to get into leading. That was my answer to this. And tango completely transformed the way I experienced it. And I had this whole other dimension of it open up to me that I'm still very much uncovering. And so it wasn't because I was significantly gifted with some sort of extraordinary talent or looks or wealth that guaranteed my current satisfaction and happiness within tango. I didn't have any of that. It was just, first, I guess, this feeling of, this is too small, I don't want this anymore. And then at some point, an allowing of a possibility that I could have a different experience. So for me, it was this possibility that I could get good at leading, that I could figure it out. I mean, when I first started leading, it was so complicated and stressful and intimidating. Just the experience of going to a class as a leader and feeling the glare from all the leaders in the room who are competing for the good followers. And, well, for followers in general, usually there's a lack of followers. So they're looking to me like I'm supposed to be following. And a lot of times I balked. I couldn't I couldn't assert myself. So it was very difficult. And it was very confusing. Most of the classes I went to, I didn't understand the methodology of how things were taught. And then there was this frustration with the fact that I would go to the class, I would learn a pattern, and then I would immediately forget it. And it just seemed like everything I tried was not really working for me. Like I thought I had like a learning disability. So, but when I found myself in this place of being stuck and feeling like I'm in a box, I was willing to give up tango. Like it got to the point where I just lost the attachment to it. And once I lost the attachment, then when the opportunity to come back into it, it was kind of like, well, I've already left it in a way as a follower. I just gave that up, gave up the idea of attracting more better leaders who will give me that experience that I'm really desiring. Like I just was like, this is not going to happen. But with leading, it was just this thing like, well, maybe I'll give myself some time to figure this out. And that will give me an excuse to still be in tango. And so then, I got to this place now where this has become my strategy for making tango work for me and bringing tango back into my life on my own terms and having the experience in tango that I want, not having to do things that I don't feel like doing, or having the confidence. The confidence is that's what we all want, right? Like I'm sure we want other things, but as a woman, I have to say, for me, the most prized possession at this point in my life, and the thing that makes me grateful for my age, is the confidence that I've been able to cultivate through my experience. And it's still probably the number one topic of conversation that comes up for me when I'm talking to other women about confidence. Confidence on so many levels is such a struggle for women. I'm sure it is a struggle for everyone, not just for women, but I'm particularly aware of the different shades and color levels of issues that have to do with confidence. So the second insight that I thought would be really interesting to share, it's something I tell my closest girlfriends on a regular basis. And it's sometimes they say it back to me in moments when I need to hear it. I have to remind this to myself as well. But it really is possible to have exactly what you want the way you want it. There's a belief that I grew up with, being a child of parents who lived through communist ideology, Soviet Union and war, and coming from a culture of extreme dedication to hard work and discipline, and the mentality that unless you work hard, you don't deserve to enjoy anything, and enjoying anything is really not appropriate anyway, because you should just want to work hard all the time. And if you're not working hard all the time, there's something wrong with you. That your value as a human being is directly derived from the amount of work you put in. And when we say work, we're talking time and energy and your attention. So that kind of work. And at some point back in my early development of my consciousness, at some point I just had this feeling like, no, like it just can't be. It can't be. And I went on a personal search, personal experimentation journey for this question of like, is it possible to actually have exactly what you want, even if it feels contradictory at the time that you want it? And even if everybody else tells you that you're not supposed to want it, that it's a silly thing to want, even when you're offered something that's a little bit less than what you want. Maybe it's an 8 out of 10. Maybe it's a 9 out of 10. And the logic will say, you know what? You might not get anything better than this. So you might as well take this right now because that's what's available. And it's been my personal experience over and over again that it's always a choice to take the thing that's given, to settle, but you don't have to. You don't have to settle. You don't have to agree to the belief that doesn't feel good to carry, or an opinion by someone else that's important in your life, and they just have this very strong opinion about who you're supposed to be, and you are tempted perhaps to agree with that opinion and take that on. And you don't have to. You don't have to. You really can have what you want exactly the way you want it. And I'll give you an example of this to make it really practical about like, how do I even mean that? Like, how does this apply in your daily life? I have a friend who was dating this guy, and she says, you know, this guy's so lovely. I really love everything about him. We have great chemistry, but I don't like his teeth. But that shouldn't really bother me because it's such a small detail, because all these other things are okay, are great. And I always tell her, well, I say two things. I say, first of all, it is good enough reason not to take it. If there is an imperfection in what you're looking at that directly contradicts a value that you know you have, some people, it's just the thing. Like, for some people, the teeth don't matter, but the hair does. You know, like some people really don't like bald guys, and then other people prefer that, you know. So if it's something that really contradicts, something that is so ingrained in you, you're just that kind of person, you know, you just really dislike redheads. Just like, you just can't stand it, you know, or you really, you know, prefer somebody who's taller than you. Can't really date somebody who's shorter than you, right? It's okay. It's okay to not settle for that. It's okay to say no to that. It does not mean that you are ungrateful and that you are passing up something really good, and you're gonna reap the consequences later, because that's the fear, right? That if you say no now, then that's it. You're not gonna get anything else. How does this apply to tango? Well, in the same way that for women, a lot of times it's so difficult to say no to dances that they don't want, or to interactions with people that they would prefer not to have. it's so hard to say no to that, because on some level, we're chasing after the attention, and whatever attention we get, we want it. Because what if I say no now and nobody else dances with me? You know, what if I dance with that person and they turn out to be really bad, and then other people see it and they won't want to dance with me? What if I say no to this friend of mine and I'm going to hurt their feelings and they'll never talk to me again? I mean, the list goes on. This is such a prevalent emotion for women. I know I felt that so much. And I keep reminding myself that it really is okay to have exactly what you want. Like, it is really possible to have what you want. However, to have what you want, to get there, you have to say no to all of the other stuff that you don't want. And I have to say, the last at least 10 years of my life has been spent saying no. Saying no to bad relationships, eventually. Saying no to financial carelessness or ignorance, gradually. You know, like, there was a process of me saying to myself, this is what I want to experience, and what's coming to me, I have to really believe that I deserve to have that thing that I want. Because if I don't deserve that, then I'm not going to be able to say no to the thing that's kind of good or almost good, right? If I really don't believe that I am going to get what I want from dancing a particular night at the Milonga, if I don't believe that I'm going to get that, then what comes to me is I'm just going to take it, because I don't know, right? So there's this dual demand of these two. So these three pieces that I'm bantering on right now: confidence, believing you can have what you want, exactly, even if it's contradictory right now. It's just because you don't know what it looks like yet. It feels contradictory. It might appear contradictory, but just stay the course, know what you want, you know? And then say no to anything that is below that does not meet your criteria. Because it's kind of like a test, you know? Even at the Milonga, it's like a little test to see, are you really convinced that you want something better, that you want a better experience? You do not want to dance with that person that feels really bad or that doesn't smell good, or you know, like, there's been people that I don't dance with because I don't like the way they smell. I just don't. They might be great dancers. I had this one friend a while back, and we used to dance a lot together. But then I actually started avoiding dancing with him, because every time he would come to a Milonga, it'd be after he cooked dinner or went to like a really stinky restaurant. So he was like smelling of fried food or something like very pungent. And then he also had like garlic on his breath, you know. So dancing with him, it just felt kind of gross, you know. So he was a good dancer, he was a good friend of mine, but I was like, you know what, this is my experience. I choose the kind of experience I want, so I need to curate it. I need to say, what is it that I actually want, believe that I deserve it, and then say no to the thing that I don't want, you know? And all of that together I think, is what creates for women, for myself as a woman, what that's done for me is created a feeling of that safe boundary that we all have been talking about in the community amongst, women for the last few years. This conversation about healthy boundaries. What are healthy boundaries? How do we protect our boundaries? And there's been a lot of effort to raise awareness about interpersonal connections at the Milonga and how do we want to treat each other. And there's been manifestos written and calls to embrace certain values. And those things are great. However, it's kind of like, I was thinking of a metaphor. It's kind of like when I learned English and I was given all these rules, and you learn to speak properly with proper grammatical structure and correct pronunciation. But then as you go around your daily life, very frequently you'll use incorrect language and inappropriate phrasing structures or whatever. Like, it will be very casual and you'll make mistakes, and there will be this imperfection that's just part of it, part of the process. So establishing of boundaries is something that is an ongoing process for us women, especially if we have not had a lot of practice in our life, or if we've been carrying around a lot of beliefs regarding what we deserve and what is it that we can offer to other people. So there's a lot to unpack there, and I'm definitely not qualified perhaps to dive deeply into this because it's such a personal journey and everybody has their own story with these kinds of things. But when we prescribe to a certain value, we do it in the moment because we believe it's true, it's correct, it's good to treat people well. But when we go into our world and we interact in real time at the Milonga, a lot of times those rules will not be observed. So instead of being upset that the rules are broken by certain individuals and that there's something wrong with them, that they were not careful enough or they weren't responsible enough to take in that belief and really put it to action, we have to learn how to respond in the moment and how to reassert our boundaries in a very real-time way. And so of everything that I've been talking about in this episode, the ability to say no, I think, is what ultimately I can distill from my years of growth and maturity, and whatever success I now have, or whatever success people perceive in me, whether it's my ability to lead and follow, or it's my the quality of my romantic relationship, or my success as a social dancer at the Milonga, all of that I can trace back to this kernel of audacity to say no to the thing that you don't want, even if the thing that you don't want has everything in it but is missing this one key element that you think is important. It's important to say no to that because you just don't know what's on the other side of that. And this is what I discovered so prominently in tango, that more and more, there's more and more layers to that. If I can just hang on and not not strive to fulfill a void, not try to make sure I get the dance because if I don't, then it means I'm dissatisfied. Like just holding off on that judgment and trusting that I will get exactly what I want. I cannot even count the number of times that's paid off for me in the most magical way, where tango showed me such incredible generosity in discovering new connections and people. And I'll leave you with this little story that I think about right now, where I still see myself doing that, and I kind of remember that because it was a very courageous act. So I was at a milonga in Buenos Aires, and this particular practica, it was considered a practica, this particular practica on a Friday night was in a space that's just kind of this one room, and there was an outdoor space on the other side of it where people hung out. But all of the capaceo was happening at this tiny little bar area, super crowded. And so every cortina, there's this hustle and bustle around the bar, people matching up for the next dance. And within 30 seconds, everybody's on the dance floor. And so then if you didn't get a dance by that point, it feels very embarrassing to stand by the bar because there's not really room to sit. There's not room to like just relax and chat. It's very much like you're standing there and just people are dancing past you, and there's this whole crowd. And you feel kind of exposed. You feel like, wow, everybody knows that I did not get asked to dance. And I remember having a lot of anxiety about that, like my worth as a dancer, that it's so embarrassing that nobody asked me to dance. And I was carrying that around for a while, and it dictated a lot of my behavior at the milonga. So, I would try to escape as quickly as possible and do the whole thing of like, oh, you know what? I need to go to the bathroom, or I need to step outside, like some behavior to hide the fact that I did not get a dance, And I saw that in other women. I see that behavior, in other contexts. It's not that unique, but I guess for this particular context, it's just the space itself was very exposing. And one night, I just kind of had this thought like, wow, this is the thing that everybody's afraid of. Everybody's afraid of feeling embarrassed and insecure and being seen as clumsy maybe, or being rejected and then being seen being rejected. Oh, that fear, like even now as I'm saying that, right, the feeling of like, oh, that cringe, And one night I was like, I am going to stand here at this bar for like the whole tanda. I think I spent the whole tanda. I just I glued myself to one spot, and everything in me screaming to do something different, to walk away, to, oh my God, people are watching me, And I just had this like feeling in me to be like, no, I'm going to stand here and I'm going to let people see that I'm not dancing, And it was funny because I just like decided to lean myself against in a more like seductive way, as if like, yeah, my feet are not hurting from standing in my heels for 12 minutes. No, not at all. I'm like really easy at this. But I'm like leaning in the most comfortable way possible. And I had this smile on my face that was totally fake. It's like this mask, like I am having exactly the time that I'm supposed to be having right now, Smiling, looking around, pretending that I'm enjoying this, on the inside. It's like, I heard a teacher call this a terror barrier. Terror barrier, which makes me think of a terror bear. So I just see this big bear, like this big bear in your mind, and you're like about to pee your pants. You're so freaked out. But, I just like invoked Beatrix Kiddo from Kill Bill and just thought of that scene where she's in the coffin having to visualize her way to finding her power. And I just stayed there. And I didn't, nothing else happened. Like, nobody asked me to dance, and I didn't achieve anything except for I was just successful at saying no to this inner limiting voice that at that point had been dictating a lot of my behavior. So that's my real application of this rule, and I'm excited to see what's next, how this plays out in my life. I'm excited to now share perhaps the kernels of wisdom I've gathered along the way, and encourage all of you out there, listeners, to enjoy the maturity process, to not be seduced by this narrative of limitation and loss and decline that is so profoundly present in every nook and cranny in our life, with these reminders everywhere. It's just a construct, and it doesn't, so little of it is actual truth and fact. So I'll leave it at that. I would love to hear from you about your experience with your age and whether you found what I'm talking about to be the case, or maybe you had some other experiences, other kernels of wisdom that you gathered. I would love to hear from you. And I, of course, I'm thinking I want to offer a deep sigh of gratitude and appreciation for the women in my life who've been guiding me along this path and who've provided such a tremendous wealth of wisdom and advice that took me to this place. So those of you out there, you know who you are, and I love all of you, and we'll chat next week. Don't forget, Horacio Godoy joining me for the first time, guest number 1 on the Tango Banter. Until then,